Welcome to the Please Suck Less podcast, a podcast where I voice my opinions and views about things that piss me off and how we can make the world suck just a little bit less. Thanks for listening. I do my best to consider myself an optimist. I don't believe in pessimism. We have enough negativity in the fire service as well as just in life in the world as general. So one of the things I want to kind of get off my chest is these people that aren't performing when they come to work. And bottom line is, nobody comes to work to be a piece of shit. You know, they're not thinking they wake up in the morning or they get hired and take this job and say, I'm going to be the biggest turd that there is. I don't think anybody comes to work or approaches the job with that mentality. But we do see people that underperform to sugarcoat it. But I don't believe that was ever their intent. What I do believe is that behavior started down this path, and the company officers, as well as the senior firefighters on the shift, didn't correct that action. They allowed it to continue, and then that ended up becoming the norm for this particular person. And then we recognize right away, well, this person's a piece of shit, and nobody wants to help this person because they never helped this person to begin with. Now, I'm not saying that that this particular person doesn't bear that responsibility. They do. We have an obligation to be high functioning people in the fire rescue service, as well as in the public safety sector in general. You know, that's what we owe it to our the citizens that we protect, but we also owe that to each other, and you owe it to yourself. But again, coming back to, nobody decided that they were going to be a turd when they grew up and be that piece of crap on the shift that brings the shift down. Again, what it is that the officers and the senior firefighters, the rest of the shift, allowed that to happen. And I would be willing to bet that there was a little bit of a drag during recruit class where they were seeing some underperforming. And it wasn't specifically addressed at that time when they were coming through the training academy with documentation and things like that. And I've said it in past podcasts that the hardest thing we ever do is discipline. You know, discipline is not easy with the documentation and the proof and all that stuff. You know, it's a lot easier you could praise somebody. That's real easy, but it's just a lot easier just to ignore it, turn a blind eye. And then this person ends up becoming a turd bag in your system. And what you'll see is they'll transfer from shift to shift, to station. So you're basically getting rid of the problem. And the officers in the shift are looking like, great, this guy's finally leaving. Now we can get back to normal. Where what should have happened was, hey, this guy's underperforming. We're going to fix it. And I'm not going to let him transfer. When I was a captain, I had a problem employee. Actually, I had a shift of issues when I became a captain. But in particular, I had a couple of people who were problems. One in particular was a serious issue. And I told this person, because they had made it a career of transferring from station to station just to get away to try to outrun their problems, and ended up becoming another officer's burden. And then they would continue to pass the buck. And this person did 15 years in the fire service as a literal anchor around the neck of their shift. And for 15 years it happened. When I came into that station, I laid out my expectations as a new captain. We did a lot of training. I did notice that there was lacking on this particular employee's part. And I told them that, hey, look, here's my expectations. You need to live up to these expectations. This is why we're doing the training. Even though we're a slow station, we still have a responsibility to be high-functioning fire rescue people. And I backed it up with, I will not allow a transfer to come across my desk so you can escape the reality of where you need to be as an employee. And I laid it all out in a performance evaluation. The person ended up getting a work improvement program that they had to meet expectations. I had the backing of my battalion chief and my duty chief, as well as the fire chief of the organization. And ultimately, this person kind of imploded, had some problems. They were taken off the floor. Ultimately, they were given the ultimatum: you can be fired or you can retire with 15 years. And this person ended up retiring. But I can tell you right now, for 6 months, it was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, was the documentation and the discipline and things like that. But ultimately, this person weeded themselves out. So, getting back to what I said originally at the top of this, is that I don't believe that people want to be bad. I think that they go down a path and it's never corrected. Now, for the officers, the supervisors, the senior firefighters, chiefs, you have a responsibility to make sure that your organization runs well. You have a responsibility to make sure that your people are performing. Um, the battalion chiefs have to rely on the captains and lieutenants to give them a snapshot of what's going on their shift. And if there's a problem and you're not sure how to handle it, for Christ's sakes, ask for help. That's what we're here for as senior staff. And if the battalion chief doesn't know how to help, then that person needs to go to the next level up until we get a solid plan in place to correct these behaviors. So, again, I try to be an optimist. I look for the good in everybody. Even if somebody is not performing well, I try to find something that they're doing well at and say, this behavior that you're showing at this particular time is what we need to see throughout everything that you do, and highlight the good stuff. I mean, there's a joke in the house that with the Grinch that stole Christmas. It was one of my kids' favorite cartoons. And my wife and I kind of looked at each other, and it's like, no wonder the Grinch was such a bad person, because everybody always said what a piece of shit that guy is, and they made songs about what a piece of shit that person is. And eventually that guy, the Grinch, became a turd. So think about how you present yourself to your employees, to your subordinates. If you're an officer, look for the good in everybody. Shine a light on the good. And then make corrections as they happen for behaviors that need to be changed. Nobody said that this job was easy, but I'll tell you right now, if you nip things in the bud quickly, it does become easier, because your shift will move smoother. So enough of that. Moving on to the next topic. I've been kind of talking about command competencies for chief officers. One of the things that they're doing in my department, as well as a lot of departments across the country, is that you're actually seeing this program, this training called command competencies, where we're actually running chief officers, battalion chiefs, assistant chiefs, deputies, even fire chiefs, through training to get what we like to call reps of scenarios for incidents. One of the things that I say a lot of things, but one of the things that I talk about when we talk about training is that as an officer, as a captain or a lieutenant, you expect your firefighters to be able to function on the fire ground, meaning pulling lines flawlessly, forcing doors, search and rescue, throwing ladders. If you're working on the ambulance, knowing your protocols, treating people with respect, doing that critical thinking, finding out, the root of the problem and getting them transported to the right medical facility. As officers, we expect that of our people. As battalion chief, we expect our captains and lieutenants to make sound decisions based on information that they're getting. We expect them to run their shifts administratively wise as well as tactically wise, flawlessly. And that comes through training. Then the question I ask is, what are chiefs doing in order to be good, to make themselves better? And there's not a lot out there. You can go to symposiums and seminars and training classes and listen to other chiefs through national speakers and through the speaker syndicate and all that stuff, and hear about leadership and things like that. But you actually have to go through stuff. And that's where this command competency comes in, where we'll actually have a digital simulation. They'll have role players. They'll dispatch calls. You have access, usually you may be in the front of your vehicle, or maybe they have like a dummy vehicle that you sit in, your computer, your tactical worksheets, and you run the incident based on the information that the role players are feeding you, and you fill out your tactical worksheet. And that's just getting in reps. That's how we practice. We can't just go out and light a building on fire and then you become the incident commander. So that's what a lot of organizations are doing to keep their chief officers sharp. And these programs are relatively inexpensive to get up and running. The digital simulation programs, depends on what you go with, is fairly inexpensive. You can run them on laptops and PowerPoint projectors, a couple of radios, which all departments have radios anyway, and a couple of role players, and then some peer evaluators. You need some other chief officers to evaluate how you're doing. And peer evaluation and constructive criticism is good to hone your skills and to improve as you move forward. Nobody's perfect. I've been through it many times. There's times where I've dropped the ball on a few things, lesson learned. But it's better to drop the ball in training than it is to drop the ball during an emergency incident where somebody could get hurt or killed. So something to think about as a chief officer. What are you doing to make yourself better? You have demands on your officers and your firefighters to be good at what they do. An old chief that I used to know used to say, "Execute the basics flawlessly." As incident commanders, we need to execute our basics flawlessly. Those basics are running incidents, filling out tactical worksheets, making decisions with imperfect information, gaining that situational awareness, and that's how you make yourself better. So, end of rant. Kept us at about 10 minutes or 11 minutes or so. So at the end of the day, what I always say, do better, suck less, be the best that you can be, praise your people, be a good leader. I'm out.